Video streaming at housefarms.com.
I don't care for you.
We're happy to have you, and everybody's excited.
Puss-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Good. Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Well, the welcoming and the praise are flowing freely in the chat room as Philip Ittner joins us this Saturday. Happy New Year, my friend, from me and Johnny Million and all of the Sparklers.
Happy New Year and happy Orthodox Christmas as well.
That's right.
Oh, that's right.
Which is right, and that's where where Santa comes down, but he's wearing a suit, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and he's got a briefcase.
with like the vest and everything.
Yeah, that's right. It's a cummerbund and
pocket watch.
That's right.
Nobody does. He does have a girlfriend. He does have a girlfriend.
Oh,
all right.
I thought that was new.
He's normally dressed in blue. No, and he's got a girlfriend made of snow who loves him so much that she jumps over the fire to impress him, and eventually kills herself and melts into the snow.
Yeah.
Nice, happy Slavic mythology.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah, Santa. I totally believe that your Canadian snow girlfriend would totally be here if she hadn't melted.
School.
She goes to a different school, and she's totally hot, and she's so much smarter than you guys. You don't even know. Yeah, that's right. You don't know her.
Oh, by the way, I completely recommend.
Jealous.
I recommend that everybody incorporate Violent Night into their Christmas festivities year after year. That one's delightful.
Violent Night, excellent. Okay, great.
I saw bits of that. I didn't see the entire thing, but
David Harbour, John Leguizamo, blood.
And by the way, you didn't need to because the Russians didn't give a crap about unorthodox Christmas, which they're apparently writing their own mythology about right now. Then Night of a Thousand Bombs. So
well, they're supposed to be. We're supposed to have a 36-hour ceasefire. The Russians unilaterally declared a ceasefire and then immediately broke it. So the Ukrainians, in the run-up to it, because everybody was like, "Are you going to also observe a ceasefire?" And they're like, "No, because the Russians are just going to break this."
Just kidding.
The Russians are just going to break this ceasefire too.
Wait a minute. This
so we
is my
know
impersonation.
who we're fighting.
This is my impersonation of the Russians calling for a ceasefire. Time out! I gotta reload. That's it. That's. I mean, imagine,
guys, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's time out. Come on,
imagine
it's not fair.
The big battle at the end of the movie Heat. If De Niro's character goes, hey, time out, everybody, time out.
Val Kilmer in Heat too.
Yes, he's magnificent in it. They show
Great show.
Val Kilmer emptying his gun and reloading to military trainees because he does it so perfect. And there's so many. I'm not kidding. That's a true story that he did it so perfectly that they were like, "This is how you do it exactly." And I love Val Kilmer. I cried during the new Top Gun because just seeing him that way and the conversation they had, it was so real because it's between these two old friends who were in a movie together this many years later. And don't get me started. We'll start there. We've had a fun week. I want to keep it as silly as we possibly can.
I know. I watched
real problems
from this
going
side
on
of
Ukraine.
this side of the Atlantic. I watched. But we've had a busy week as well. The entire holiday season has been just intense. Last week, unfortunately, I wasn't able to join you for a variety of reasons. Partly my fault, but also we were under severe attack on New Year's Eve. And you have to understand, I did a little vlog about this, but you have to understand that on the calendar, on the holiday calendar of the post-Soviet space, New Year's Eve is the biggest holiday of the year because during the Soviet Union, they tried desperately to crush any kind of religious holidays. So they tried to turn everything that was Christmas, end of year, and mash it all together and throw it into New Year's Eve. So New Year's Eve has become this massive holiday, which includes a little bit of everything. There's gift giving, and then there is, of course, the champagne at midnight and all that kind of stuff, and fireworks. We got different kind of fireworks this year, but and it's a really important day. So for them to have attacked on New Year's in the way that they did, which was an attack unlike any I have ever witnessed in this war so far, it was just constant incoming air attacks. Just like we had intervals of like 20 minutes, we had an interval of like 90 minutes, we had an interval of like 3 hours in the morning of New Year's Eve. But they kept shooting at us, and they were shooting at us in the center of Kiev, and I heard reports around the country it was similar. They weren't attacking military installations, which they kind of stopped doing anyhow, except on the front lines. They didn't attack even the infrastructure. This was an attack on the civilian population. It was in essence, by its very definition, a terror attack, because they were trying to intimidate and send a message of, we know you love New Year's. Everybody in the post-Soviet space has this special place for New Year's on their calendar, and we're going to violate that and attack you. And it was absolutely 100% a terror attack. And it was intense. And then after New Year's itself, after midnight on the 31st into 2023, they hammered us for about 3 hours. They just were chucking stuff at us constantly. And it was just explosions in the air, anti-aircraft going off all the time for about a 2 hour period, about a 3 hour period, give or take. The intensity would ebb and flow, but it was almost constant for about 3 hours. And the Ukrainian air defense was, astonishing. It knocked out the vast majority of the missiles. A couple got through, sadly, hit civilian installations, hit a hotel here in Kiev, blew up a car not far from, I could see the smoke rising from my balcony, just about 3 minutes walk from where I was. It was quite the day. I'm sorry it was manic, so please just
fear not.
Notch it up to the, I'm in a war zone, so.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, it's going to key up your nervous system a touch, I guess.
A little bit.
A little bit. I know that, the Russians must know to some degree, no matter how much they talk about it on their, Channel 1 or whatever, any of the Sludgev shows and blah, 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 that the new Marjorie Taylor Greene and that crowd are going to have zero impact on Ukrainian funding in the next year. No. Like that ship has sailed. They know it. They can use them maybe as a PowerPoint for political manipulation, maybe posting things, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, they got to know, right? That it's not.
Oh yeah. No, what always not always, but what has begun to tickle me is the fact that the Ukrainians know far more about our internal domestic politics than any of these tankies or guys who take their talking points from the Kremlin or whatever. That they just take those talking points, those guys who are anti-Ukraine, kind of like, we're spending too much money, and we're fighting a war to the last Ukrainian for the benefit of the whatever, military
industrial petrodollar.
Right, exactly. Those guys get their talking points and they just regurgitate them. Ukrainians study us. Yeah. They know our politics. They're like, oh yeah, that representative from there, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, she represents Georgia's XYZ district, and I'm like, you know more about our politics. Well, of course we know a lot about your politics. They say to me, Phil, because it's what happens domestically in your country is going to affect what happens in our country. But they are also very well aware that even with a Republican House, that nothing's really going to change here for them. Right. As a matter of fact, the Europeans are now starting to send even tanks. The French have just announced that they're going to start sending tanks, something that they were reluctant to do. And I suspect that now there will be competition internally within Europe to try and the Germans will now have to respond, because they've said, no, we're never going to send a tank. And The Ukrainians desperately, well, not desperately, but they would very much like to get their hands on, the Leopard 2 main battle tank. And the Germans might have to do it because now the French have sent their armored vehicles. They may get U.S. Bradleys. The Bradley is a great fighting vehicle. I've been in many a Bradley. It's not very comfortable, but it's a darn good piece of kit. It saved my life in Solder City. Saved my life.
None of them are using Tesla auto drive. It seems they aren't.
No. Well, we've been phasing out the Bradley, but I was under fire in Solder City, in Iraq, in Baghdad, and it must have been 2005 or 2006. And I was in the back of a Bradley, and we were swarmed by Solder's militia. And my vehicle got hit 7 times with RPGs, and none of them penetrated because they have these reflexive armor. They're great. They're really very. I am here today because of a Bradley fighting vehicle. Otherwise, I would be 6 feet under. So give them to the Ukrainians by all means. They will be a really good asset on the front lines. They're a nice piece of kit.
Okay.
But anyhow, getting back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, they're not afraid, and they know.
Yeah. Hold that thought, and we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to Johnny Million will, of course, be farming questions from our chat room at infocabletwars.com or at twitch.tv/HalSparks, or if you're on the Facebook page, any of those, just...
Andrea's grabbing them for me over on Twitch.
Excellent. Okay. Johnny Million will be gathering questions for Phil, and I have a couple myself and some thoughts, so we'll be back right after this. It's the HalSparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. I know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the HalSparks show. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the HalSparks show. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The HalSparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good. By the way, so I put a poll online to see what Kevin McCarthy's title should be. So far, which was Squeaker of the House, Sino, which is, of course, speaker in name only, Lil Cave-In, which I think is his rap name, and Gates's Gimp. Gates's Gimp is actually winning. If you're a fan of Pulp Fiction, is winning currently. Is at 46.5%. So and by the way, because of how Twitter polls work now, Elon Musk thinks this will be a law. So we will legally have to refer to him as Gates' Gimp going forward. And by the way, that was Mike Rogers who took a swing at Matt Gaetz, turning the closest thing we've had to kind of what happens in the Russian Duma, somebody taking a poke at somebody. Luckily, Gates wasn't anywhere near a window, so he's fine. But again,
the Europeans think we've lost our minds. The Europeans the
Europeans.
Nuts.
First of all, the Europeans can settle down because Germany never got through this business of being a democracy without coming up with Hitler. The UK and Sweden and a couple other countries are still tacit monarchies. The French are always a mess and have to create these kind of coalition governments all the time. This is just the one break they can have where it looks like our system wavered for a little bit. They went with a parliamentary system. This is the closest thing to a parliamentary vote that we actually have is the Speaker of the House part, and that's why it's become a mess. Because there's a bunch of inserious people on the other side. But for the most part, no country gets to skip this kind of stuff. Sorry. We're one of the youngest on the planet. If we can look back over their 800-year history or 1,600-year history and not see people excuse me, French, you had guillotines at one point. So we can have a fake gallows erected by a bunch of
let's hope it doesn't get
maggots.
to that.
It won't, but we did. I'm just saying. Yes, somebody in the chat was like, Al getting defensive of our country. You're damn right I am. This is what a real patriot looks like, not this faux hashtag patriotism, you see, like warts and all. I don't care.
There's a lot of,
love it or leave it.
there's a lot of concern. There's
Yes.
actually a lot of concern. It is not necessarily. I will admit that there are many Europeans right now who are going, well, those Americans, what can you expect? But there are a lot of Europeans who are going like, hey man, that's not cool. We want you guys to you're important to us. We want to see you being, swinging on the floor of the House of Representatives is not a really encouraging sign. We don't like seeing that over here.
I would argue their entire reason for feeling that is because they're on more shaky ground than we are, and they look at us like the edge of the pool they can have their hand on while they swim in the pool of democracy. So I agree. That said, let's it's hard to even know where to start with the number of things. So let's grab a couple of questions, because I know Johnny has them already. And
Sure.
And then
I do.
Let me just also just quickly say, we mentioned this in the break.
Okay.
Anybody who's got a quick minute, go check out YouTube. Just do a quick Google search for New Year's Eve celebration, Channel 1 Russia.
God.
It's the most surreal thing. Maybe we'll talk about it later, but let's take a question. It's just,
that's
it's weird.
The happy ending, kind of. Yeah.
You're going to be, maybe that's the happy ending. All right.
Right.
What's your question there?
So, Old Longboard wants
Johnny, what
to
you
know, what does Phil think about the corruption in the current Ukrainian parliament?
Yeah, not good. It's bad. It has been for a long time, and for much of this war, they've been putting that on the back burner. But things are still happening. There are still going to be opportunists.
Sure.
There are still going to be people who try and take advantage of the situation. They're not. I will say that there's almost a zero tolerance policy right now. If you get caught and you're up to something, they'll throw the book at you real hard. Now, obviously, there's gonna be corruption. It's just it's been a corrupt system. The parliament has been infiltrated for decades by guys who kind of wanted to run it like the Russians run their Duma, or how or direct infiltration by Russians. It's going to take some time for them to get clean from that, but they're determined to do it. Certainly during the war, but in the post-war period, I have every bit of faith that the Ukrainian people are going to say, and I've heard them say this to me repeatedly: when the war's over, we tackle corruption at home, because it has to mean something. We can't die and go through this trauma and then have a bunch of guys robbing us blind in the parliament. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm not going to lie, it's an issue, and they're doing the best they can to combat it.
Well, that's what in the clearing out of the people, like the Orthodox Church members that were working on behalf of Russia and the like.
Yes,
there was also
political parties. A lot of people make a lot of people attack. A lot of people attack Zelensky, and they're all about you dismantled a bunch of political parties. Well, yeah, they weren't political parties. They were fifth columnists that infiltrated the political system.
Exactly.
So I mean, none of this is great. But
if you have freedom, if you have freedom in your country, the first thing authoritarians will weaponize against you is that freedom, and it's why you have to write laws that are so dense, because it has to narrowly thread the kind of just wide open Wild West aspect of things that maybe some of your citizens would like, and the inability of them to recognize that outside forces can take advantage of that to totally wipe out your freedoms altogether if you have a system like that. It's why our laws are written so narrowly, and why, by the way, they will increasingly start looking sort of xenophobic after a time, because you've got these outside forces working so hard to push their way in, because you've got Russia and China and others going, well, they don't seem to care, so there
are opposition parties. There are opposition parties that still exist and have. I heard. There are opposition parties that still have seats in parliament, but they're legitimate and they are honestly in opposition to Zelensky, but they're still good faith players. What Zelensky did when he got rid of a bunch of parties was get rid of a bunch of Russian stooges and infiltrators and fifth columnists.
Yeah,
so,
and what do they go?
They
what do they go
there.
do? They immediately go to Aaron Mate and that crowd's, the chain of news sources that they use or whatever, and say they're destroying freedom in the country in the name of freedom, just like America does. Aren't you mad? Yeah. So, yeah. So, let's grab another.
The corruption
question.
is not good, but they're working on
it. Yeah. I'm going to put myself on mute after I read this question.
Right.
This is from Berkeley Dowd. What is the most underreported aspect of the war that deserves more media attention?
There you go. There you go.
Oh boy,
Good
my
one,
goodness, well, I mean. I'm biased because this is my raison d'etre of what I'm doing here in the country, but I would like to see more in-depth understanding of what is really going on here and why we came to this place and what is trying to be built here and who the Ukrainians really truly are and what their sense of statehood and their sense of the future of their country. What it means to them, what it is, and why they're fighting so hard to achieve it, because I think that will give people a better understanding of why we should support them.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, people do stories about the internally displaced people or the refugees, or the fighting itself. All of that, I think, is being well covered. But I would like to see more in-depth stuff. I'd like to see more talking to Ukrainians. I don't know, boy, that's a really good question. But off the top of my head, I think that's the one. Let's try and understand what this country is.
As the Philip translator, in many ways, that is why you're there. That's because that part of the story, the humanity of what's going on there for the Ukrainians and what they're actually fighting for and what they hope to get. Is out of this whole mess is the reason you're there and the story that you're telling. Now, I would argue that one of the least known, and reported media aspects of it is, quite frankly, the infighting amongst the Russians, because it's one of those things that you occasionally see a story in the Daily Beast, and you occasionally see a story, maybe even a reference to that Daily Beast story in the Washington Post or one of the stories about what's going on in Ukraine. But the Institute for the Study of War is all up in this stuff. And when you go over there and look at it, they take that as it is having a serious impact on Russia's failure. Yes, the HIMARS help. Yes, not having control of the air has limited Russia because of anti-aircraft and anti-missile technology that we've sent them. Absolutely. However, one of the biggest factors is these people doing effectively what we saw the Republicans doing on the floor of the House to some degree. The infighting amongst themselves is tying their hands in a material way. It would be one thing if these stories came up and they were kind of propaganda-ish, but they are resulting in the measurable deaths of a material amount of Russian soldiers and Wagner mercs amongst each other. That has had an impact on the battlefield that is statistically significant. That should be a hair on fire news story when you talk about it. Prigozhin this week was even. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I agree because I mean that's the other side of the line. The front line. It's hard for me to, except for my connections of covering Russia and the former Soviet Union for 25 years. I can only talk about what's happening on the other side of the battle lines from direct contact I have with friends and former colleagues and stuff, or I get it as everybody else does from the media. But I think you're right, Hal. I think the other side of the equation, we need to talk a great deal about what this really means to Russia and why this is such an existential threat, not only to Putin's Russia, but just to Russia in general. They're going to have to face up to the fact that they're no longer an empire, and that's going to be a now. One person I can recommend for that kind of coverage is a former colleague of mine at CBS way back in the day, and he has now been BBC for 20 years. Steve Rosenberg. Rosenberg, it's just as it sounds, Rosenberg. He's the Moscow-based correspondent for the BBC. He has forgotten more about Russia than I will ever know. He is one of our best in the Western world, and thankfully he has decided to stay on that side of the battle lines in Russia, and he's been traveling around Russia talking to Russians, and he's, as much as he's able to because of the restrictions that the state puts on him, he has been pretty darn good about talking about the fact that this is fracturing Russia badly. Yeah. Do not believe the guys who say that Russia is just going to weather this storm and we can't affect them with sanctions. We can't affect them with this. We can't affect them with that. This mighty Russian country is going to, outlast everybody. Not true at all. They are cracking at the seams right now. I have so many friends, and this is anecdotal perhaps, but I mean it is followed up by reporting by great reporters like Steve. Right. But I have friends myself who are like, we're having conference calls every week with my family and friends because like people are, they don't know what their future is. They're manically depressed. There have been suicides. This is a major trauma for Russia, and that is something that is not being reported as much as I think it should be. But that's beyond my purview because I can't come and go as I please across the battle lines.
We got to take a break. When we come back, I have a question myself too. We blasted past that, but let's grab a break and we'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Philip Ittner at 1L 2Ts. Follow him on Twitter.
You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
So during the it was a quick break, but during the break I was bringing up the fact that the reasoning behind this weird like fight of attrition that Prigozhin and the Wagner group keep trying to do with Bakhmut. Our general theory is that since Russia pays them by the mile or the kilometer, if they gain a kilometer, they get paid. If they lose it, they don't have to refund the money. So they just keep losing and regaining and losing and regaining. It's like a Pez dispenser of cash straight out of the Kremlin. But the White House put forward an idea that they think, according to the intel that they've gotten, that may explain not just the Wagner Group's movement politically in Russia, but also their movements in Africa and the Middle East. So the Wagner Group has been kind of this weird Rasputin-y group in Prigozhin where he kind of puts his hand on Putin's soldier and goes, let me take care of it for you. Never mind the fact that the 36-hour ceasefire would not pertain to them, only to Russian troops. And so what's the point? And that they sort of are equal in their damage power to some degree. But Prigozhin has been showing up in very resource-heavy areas in African conflicts and in Middle Eastern conflicts. Now, Russia is always there, and everybody in the world has this general idea that the only reason anybody fights over an area is if they get something there that you can get it over with. It's not true because UN troops have been in countries where, quite frankly, the European Union, the United States, and our South American allies, for example, get nothing from moderating the civil war except some dead soldiers and a lot of political muck in several African countries. But the ones the Russians show up in, there's gold, diamonds, cobalt, whatever you want to say. There are everywhere there's Russians, there's resources, but not everywhere there's war, there's resources. And that's kind of one of the things that people kind of miss. In this particular case, Prigozhin over this time has been weaseling his way into all of these fights and ending up with effectively being the control point for those resources for the Russian government. And the White House, a White House official told Reuters this week that the head of the Wagner Group wants the salt and gypsum from Bakhmut. That's what they want. They want access to that, and that once they held on to that, they could start moving those resources out. Just dig. That it isn't about getting arms in those trucks. Maybe this explains why they're sending munitions to the front in these open boxcars, because the idea is that they're going to send salt back. It's not about what you're bringing to the front. It's what you're taking out. And that would make a method to the madness. Yeah.
It's a very interesting idea, because I had the conversation with a Ukrainian friend of mine about how, so Bakhmut, you're right. One of the big things about Bakhmut is salt reserves, right? Mm-hmm. And this friend of mine had said to me, she said, back before the war started, almost all the salt that you would buy in stores here in Ukraine came from Bakhmut. There's another small area kind of along the Romanian border, but aside from that, that's where all your salt would come from, is the salt mines around Bakhmut. That's a really interesting idea, and it's certainly possible, because we've seen the Wagner guys do this in country after country after country. Right. They will roll into a place, and if there is a natural resource or something that they can grab, put onto a truck, and then ultimately onto a plane or a railway, they will grab it, because they're in it for the money. That's what the Wagner guys are fighting for. They're not fighting for the state. There might be some bleed over, but 9 times out of 10, they're fighting for money. So if they can grab something and spirit it away back to Russia, they'll do it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's a major motivator for Prigozhin and his boys. Well,
and then, by the way, Romania, and like that particular, what was the city that you're talking about? Romania or whatever anyways, the Romans used to pay their soldiers in salt. So literally, the phrase, "Are you worth your salt?" literally came from how valuable you were as a warrior for the Roman Empire. This entire area, and by the way, Prigozhin and his people all believe themselves to be, if not direct lineage to, the great Roman warriors or the Spartans or whatever. Pick your poison. They don't really care. It's all goofy. But but that was the premise of that, was like access to salt in your life was hugely important. And them wanting to control that has twofold meaning. One, it's obviously a financial resource that is very important to the area, if that's the primary area where the salt is coming out from. I'm sure that that's true of salt in Poland and other areas, that you'll see a lot of Bakhmut salt on shelves and that kind of stuff, and access to and control of that is a big deal. But also that kind of like bragging rights of being worth your salt and being the great warriors who fight for the salt of the land and the blood and soil, blah, 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 is got to be, a factor in the machismo of it as well. There's no downside. But these guys, that could be Prigozhin now posturing to be the new warrior king of a fallen Russia, which is a really scary, grotesque notion. I don't see it happening, because I don't either, but snuffed by his own people, but it doesn't mean the idea isn't in his head affecting his strategy.
Well, and this is the problem, is that when you create an autocracy where the most important link in the chain is your head of state, in this case Putin, and Putin is so afraid of anybody coming and nipping at his heels that he has destroyed any opposition. What that means is that when you take that away, when you take that major link in the chain out of the equation, you then have dozens of little warlords and guys jockeying for power and all the rest of it. So when Putin eventually goes, which I think is a pretty safe bet, there's going to be a vacuum, and when that vacuum happens, somebody is there. They're all going to start. And look, again, this is Russian history 101. Right. It happened in the Tsarist times with the boyars, the lords of the land would get together. If some catastrophe had befallen the Tsar, or if the Tsar was no longer able to rule, they would get together and they'd scrap it out, oftentimes quite violently, until they found a leader. The same thing happened in the communist era with the Politburo, whether it was Khrushchev or Brezhnev, or when Stalin was there's that great movie, The Death of Stalin, and you see it, and that's just Russian history repeats itself, and it's going to happen again. I am only hopeful that this will be doomed to repeat it. I am only hopeful that this will be such a catastrophic blow to Russia that they will finally look in the mirror and do the hard work, as I've said before, that I think that is gone long overdue in trying to fix that country and make it more manageable.
Shadow Woman, thank you for the subs, but I want to appreciate it. But I want to touch on this one thing about Prigozhin, maybe, thinking that he's moving his way into a power position, even if he's not the kind of person who ends up prime minister or president. But he can control. The man behind the man is obviously, in
he could be the kingmaker.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The issue is that, to your point, Putin has put himself in a position where he has effectively eliminated the political rivals that he might have and left only with military rivals, which is how you end up dead. If you eliminate all the people that could oust you by a vote.
Not always. Not always. Yeah. During his ascent, there was a guy by the name of Alexander Lebed. Mm-hmm. And Lebed was a hero of the Chechen War. And Lebed started making, this is like, I want to say this is 98, 99, that kind of era. Mm-hmm. And he was making overtures on the political scene just as Putin was ascending to what he eventually would become. And Lebed had a really ill-timed and unfortunate helicopter crash.
Oh,
you know
what?
Military guys,
bad luck.
That's why that's why they don't do a NCO class in the Russian military. There are generals, and then there are the vast majority of conscripts and just kind of enlisted men, because you don't want a military class that could challenge the political class. If you can control a handful of generals at the elite, at the top level, at the chief of staff kind of level, that's much more manageable than if you had a bunch of majors and lieutenants and even down to corporals and captains. Because competency, if they're seen and they get to be war heroes, and then maybe they have political aspects. I mean, Zhukov, after the Second World War, was sent out to Siberia. He won the war for Stalin, and Stalin all but basically exiled him. Yeah. So, anyhow,
I agree that
Prigozhin could be a kingmaker, but not king.
It doesn't. I don't doubt for a second that he's blind to this history and doomed to repeat it. But also on just a modern, present day geostrategic reality check, knowing that I have shelved everyone that I could argue with, and the only people left in the room are the people who would slit my throat, is a really scary place to box yourself into. And again, it seems to be.
Did you see him? Did you see him at Christmas ceremonies today?
By himself?
At the chapel at the Kremlin, by himself.
Yes.
Ooh, that was spooky. That was
super weird. Yeah. And God knows if it was actually taped.
Because you can see on his face. You can see on his face how awkward he is. And all the priests are walking around with the incense, and they're lighting stuff, and they're reciting hymnals and all the rest of it. And he's just awkwardly standing there alone in a church, in a chapel.
For those of you who don't know, people don't know. Putin celebrated Orthodox Christmas Mass today at a church alone, and it's like this weird little chamber too. It wasn't even like he went down to the church and they emptied the
Kremlin
joint.
church.
Yeah,
it's the Kremlin church. We've seen it before.
Yeah, it's like the one at a hospital or something. It's like the kind of shrunk down version of it, and they just he's standing there like an idiot with his hands at his side and looking pale and puffy, and they're going through the motions of having this church service while he just watches, and that's it. That's Christmas Putin style, and the reason he's doing it is because he can't be in a church full of strangers or even a crowd of supporters that size because he doesn't trust any of them and he's afraid they're going to kill him. By the way,
and he doesn't want to lend them support. He doesn't want to be seen with them because that will then give them political capital. And if the sharks do start to circle and start nipping at him, he doesn't want to have given them any support. So he doesn't have anybody to stand with, not only because he's a isolated piece of work, but because he's afraid of giving them any power by being there with him. So
and meanwhile,
it's just so dysfunctional.
Right. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks he's a powerful leader and Joe Biden is weak. And Joe Biden met with was at the opening of a bridge construction project from the infrastructure bill with Republicans and Democrats
with McCarthy.
With Mitch McConnell in Kentucky.
With McConnell.
Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, saying, you can take his word to the bank. He's a good man, blah, blah, blah. Which, by the way, obviously digging McConnell's grave through praise, which, Biden, that's not lost on him as a politician. But at the same time, not afraid at all. Not afraid at all to be standing there like, we're building a bridge. Here he is. Good man. How you doing? This is how we do government. Here, we're fine. He could, everything outside, by the way, not in they didn't do it under the bridge, hidden behind a wall. Outside, in public, with Democrats and Republicans, the president of the United States, while all this nonsense was going on in the House, was glad-handing with Mitch McConnell at the building of an actual physical bridge, as metaphorically, and it's just fantastic. Anyways, we got to take a break. We'll come back after this is the happy ending, and of course, we'll talk about we'll take more questions and more Russian New Year's Eve stories. Because man, you have to look. Go tweet it while we're in break. Just go search it online. Russian New Year's Eve celebration. Barf, barf. Okay, we'll be back.
Let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky. Let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. 'Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! Real quick before we get into this, yay! If I may, I usually like to start off. I like to do as part of the happy ending is a piece of good news that's not bad news for anybody. But in our political system in the world right now, it's increasingly hard to do that, in this particular sense. But the jobs report for the United States was incredibly good last week, and we added 235,000 jobs when everybody thought it was going to tank, and unemployment went to like 3.4, something ridiculously small. 3.45. They were rounding it up to 3.5 to just try to make it look, slightly less awesome than it was. And it is good news across the board for even the people who are detractors of it. The Kudlows of the world, the Republicans of the world are very angry that these numbers are pointing in this direction, even before a Speaker of the House was nominated, which they can now, I guess, take some credit for stuff, even though they're not going to do anything. I just want to say congratulations, America. You did it. There we go. Now, America is going to hell. We're a country in decline with 3.5% unemployment and 223,000 jobs last week added. And there you go. So feel free to send salt. Yeah. So, all right, next, let's grab some more questions because we're lucky to have Philip. That's a happy ending in and of itself that you're here with us today, sir. That by itself, we're so happy you're here. A round of applause in the chat room and elsewhere for that. So thanks.
Well, I'll take it.
Go ahead, Johnny.
All right, so I've got a real quick one from Nick Rich. Are you using Starlink?
I have got a Starlink. I have not been using it yet, but I do have one, yes.
Okay.
They're not expensive, amazingly.
Oh, good.
Mm-hmm. They're subsidized by the U.S. government.
Is asking, where do you hide during the air raids?
Not exactly, but in theory.
Yeah, where does one hide?
Don't pull up a Google map or anything.
Well, I don't because I'm here for a different reason, and so I will go out on my balcony. I'll throw on my helmet. I'll throw on my vest just in case. Mainly just my helmet, really, and then I'll grab my camera and I'll kind of go from balcony to balcony, seeing if I see anything.
Optional.
But that's just me. That's because I'm here to document the war. Most people will go into down into the metro system, or if you look at there's a section. I know that my Christmas video was pretty long. It's over an hour long because I wanted to touch on a whole bunch of things about how we're living in winter and how people are doing during Christmas and that kind of stuff. There's an entire section which is chaptered off about what is called the Perahod. And it's basically just underground shopping centers because of the weather. And so people would go underground to do their shopping because walking along the streets, right, or like Toronto. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There are a couple cities that do this around the globe, not just in the Soviet Union. But people will go down there because there's electricity. It's subterranean, so you're safer. Generally, there's heat, and it's just this massive, wide open space. So go take a look at my vlog, Christmas and how we're living through this winter. I think I called it, and you'll see what a Perahod is like. That's where people will go.
Right.
And of course, the metro, which is really deep.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of pictures from that, and it's where
Singing
Bono
and Christmas trees
performed. Bono performed in a subway. He was a busker for one day, I think, and it was that Bono returned to his roots as a busker.
Letterman interviewed Zelensky in a metro station. I mean, there's this whole thing about that. So,
yep, the world is a busker.
Anyhow,
go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Where'd it go? Oh, I'm sorry. Connie Kelly asks, is the onset of winter changing the military strategy, and has the change in our Congress had more effect than winter?
No. No to both, actually. We had a couple of cold days at the beginning of winter, but this has thankfully been a really mild winter so far. Touch wood. It has not been bad at all. Like I can go out. I don't need thermals. I don't need I don't need to be bundled up. It's almost like it's
fall.
It's like a mild fall even. I mean, there's not a massive snow. We're not going sub-zero quite often. It's thankfully been a very mild winter. There had been arrangements made to kind of hopefully the ground would ice over and they could maneuver with armor. That is, it's a give and take with the winter, because if it doesn't freeze, then you're dealing with mud. So the winter, I mean, look, winter weather is going to affect you. It depletes your energy physically as a human being, as a soldier in a trench line. It makes maneuvering armor around difficult unless it's fully frozen. Winter is obviously having an effect, but it is not a determinative factor. It's not the end all be all. As far as the Congress and its change into a Republican House, again, we talked about this very briefly at the beginning, but yeah, the Ukrainians know exactly how our system works because they have to. So they are not overly concerned because they know that ship has sailed and that they're going to continue to get weapons, hopefully as long as they need them, because let's hope this war doesn't go, into 2024. I firmly do not believe it will.
I don't think so
either. But war is fickle. So
Also, by the way,
let's hope next New Year's is in peace.
Just in case anybody's wondering, it is the 98% and 96%, I would say, of Russia is -4 to -13 degrees Celsius.
The Russians,
right
by
now.
contrast, by contrast, right now, there is a warm pocket in Europe.
Yeah,
there's a warm pocket. It's a very unusual weather pattern happening in Western and Central Europe. and we're right on the border of it in kind of Ukraine and Kiev, because there's a massive cold front, and Russia itself is being hit with. Yeah, it's all over Russia. That really severe winter in Russia.
So you're saying that
Ukraine somehow got
to freeze Europe
spot
out? So Putin's plan to freeze Europe out.
Well, you know what it is.
Exactly his plan.
You know what it is. No, not exactly his plan at all. I think it might have to do with some of those space lasers that a certain representative was talking about. Maybe that's influencing the weather. So
it's the Chinese weather machine.
Got another question? I think we have time for another.
We got 2 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
we got 2 minutes.
Okay, so Treva Jones has no question for Philip, but she just wanted to let you know how much we appreciate his time and how glad we are that you found a friend in Hal.
Aw, you got a friend.
Well,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up. Then I want to point out a couple of quick things as we wrap this up. Then, talking about that, I encourage everybody to go and look on YouTube for the New Year's ceremony, but also the Christmas ceremony. The Christmas ceremony, for some reason, they decided to sing basically every pop tune related to Christmas. They got a Russian version of Mariah Carey. Western
Russian
music
lyrics.
Very weird. Right. But the really bizarre one was the one they did on New Year's, which is all soft filter, and the colors are oversaturated, and people are dressed up weirdly, and they've got Putin is nowhere to be seen. They have symbolic soldiers dressed there, in their starchy dress, Russian uniforms. They're all made up with literally makeup and garish colored outfits. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out that maybe the folks didn't
we'll have to
see.
Wait. Hold on, we're out of time. We're out of time, though. We'll do it.
We're out of time. We'll do it next week.
We'll do it.
We'll do it
post show.
We'll do another post show. But go check it out.
Yeah, you guys can watch that clip as well later on at infochamberwars.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you, patrons, and we'll see you guys next week.